How would you explain depression to somebody if they're listening to this right now? Like, I don't know if I have depression, and obviously a clinical depression term might be completely different, but in your words, what is depression?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question you asked. So depression for me is a spectrum. I think some people have an idea of what depression is, and I think from my perspective, and because I've been in the hospital multiple times, and it's not just my own journey of witness, but I've seen a lot of people go through struggles. I've seen a lot of other people's journeys. I've helped them, they've helped me. But depression's on a spectrum where, on one end, someone could really have some off days. On another end, I've seen people who are like catatonic, where literally, when I was in one hospital, there was a person with severe depression, and they were literally unable to talk, and they were just doing some movements over and over again. And they actually got some treatment done in the hospital, ECT, and they were able to bounce back and completely different person. But depression, it's a depressed state. So you're thinking, projecting the world's really negative. It can be as intense of having suicidal thoughts, which I had, and some things can be situational that can bring things on, meaning that there can be life circumstances that can definitely be a catalyst, that can make you feel depressed. And then sometimes, like in some of my situations where I had a major depression, I had suicidal thoughts. Like the thoughts were just more spontaneous. Like I was like, well, I'm writing a book, and the title I want to call it is Death by Pretzel, because I was literally like, and it kind of talks about how sometimes depression doesn't even make sense, but I was literally eating a pretzel and like thinking like, how could I kill myself with a pretzel? That's how depressed I was. So I mean, it's there's there's like motivations off, libido can be off, energy's low. You just don't really have a care to get out and really walk around and engage with people. And it's definitely like an off baseline from where you normally are. People around you tend to maybe recognize symptoms first, more so than yourself. And people around you also recognize symptoms when you're getting better too, more so than yourself. But yeah, that's kind of my overall perspective.
So how would somebody know? Because obviously we have a lot in the past year and a half or so. The
Yeah.
entire world has had big issues, but how would somebody know if there's just some sort of traumatic event that happens to them? Maybe somebody passes. Maybe there's a relationship, the long-term relationship that fails. How can they distinguish between that and being depressed? I mean, there's a depressive state, but is it a certain period of time where people are like, wow, I can't get out of this. It's been months on end and just I'm in a funk, or is it a case by case basis?
Um, I mean, there's like two answers to that. Like one, there's like DSM, right? It's like whatever the DSM has a criteria they put you under to help treat you, and whether that's helpful or not. I think it's, for me, like what I've seen with some people, it's kind of like a baseline that goes longer than a 2 week threshold. Like something that's really longer than that 2 week into a month that lasts longer. But I also think it's very base by base.
Yeah.
It's also just the normal things that normally bring you joy just don't really bring you joy anymore.
That's good. I think a lot of people, that's the one thing that I commonly hear is that be happy, and sometimes you should be able to kind of just like set apart your different parts of your life, and if you go to work or go to work out and just things just you don't want to do anymore and it doesn't seem enjoyable. Is there anything in your life, or you feel like this was the catalyst, this was the trigger, or just all of these little things started coming up? Because a lot of times people, they could have their, I mean, a child or a parent or somebody pass, and then it just, they don't ever get out of that for a long time unless they seek help. Is there anything in your life that kind of, you're like, oh, this is where it started?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question too. For me, I think a lot of this came from the perfectionism. I think the perfectionism, like I've always been a very intense person, and I took that to an extreme where I sacrificed socializing, community, different things to like have this thing that I wanted to achieve that doesn't really exist. And like for me, it wasn't school, it was like a 4.0 GPA. So it was a combination of that. I think my family, were more likely predisposed with depression. And then also I did have, growing up, seasonal depression. Like I never like looked back, I never took any medication, but I look back, I'm like, oh, in the winters, like I tend to put on more weight, or is a little more lower. But there's a concept that's called the diathesis stress model, which is like everyone has a different set point. And this is just one theory out there, but people have different set points. So if you have like a hereditary like predisposition to have depression, that set point might be a little lower. And it just takes a bunch of events to kind of hit that set point that then causes your chemistry in your brain to go a little out of whack, which might take you longer to kind of get back on. Whereas like other people where that set point's a lot higher, it might take something like going off to war or something a lot more traumatic in one's life, or the loss, of a child or a loved one to kind of hit that set point. But for me, I think it was not particularly one thing, but just a combination of different things that I was ignoring for a point, and it just kind of hit me hard.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head right there. Ignoring a bunch of little things. People like, don't sweat the small stuff. But the thing is, 100 small things can equal a lot. And eventually you just blow up about, I don't know, somebody leaving the toilet seat up or whatever the hell it is, right? And it's not about the toilet seat. It's not about the argument. It's about these other 100 things that you didn't talk about